One of the most commonly used methods of factoring would be factoring trinomials. Factoring trinomials is easier when you have a coefficient of a 1 outside of an x squared. It is totally doable if you have a coefficient that is greater than a, but it just has an extra step to it. So let's look at both of them. Coefficient of 1, you're looking to see what multiplies to the last term and adds to the middle term. So you look for two numbers that multiply to -75 and add to 10. Those two numbers are +15 and -5. So you would write the two factors, x plus the number 15 and then x minus the number 5. You do want to always look to see if there's a GCF. This next problem over here, 2y squared plus 30y plus 72, looks like it's going to be one where we have an a greater than 1. However, you still always want to look to see if you have a GCF first. Factor that GCF out if you can, which in this case, they are all divisible by 2. So before I get started, if I were to factor out the 2, now I can look, and now I have a coefficient of 1 in front of my squared term, and it takes us back into the easier type of trinomial factoring, where we're simply looking for what numbers multiply to 36 and then add to 15. And those numbers are 12 and 3. You have to keep this 2 out front. It's not like we did anything to it. It's just it's factored out as a GCF, so it needs to remain out front. It does get a little bit more challenging once we look and realize that, okay, I have a 2 out front as my A coefficient, my leading coefficient. I cannot factor out a GCF of 2 because 11 is not divisible by 2 as well. So I'm going to have a leading coefficient in order to do this problem. The only way, I always want to start looking at the first term, the only way to get a 2x squared is to multiply 2x and x. When you factor, you don't want to have any fractions as coefficients. It's all whole numbers, no decimals or anything like that. So the only way I can possibly get 2x squared is with a factor of 2 and a factor of 1. Now, instead of just looking at 12 and saying what multiplies to 12 and adds to 11, I need to actually take the 2, take the 2 and the 12 and multiply them together and think to myself, okay, I actually need to figure out what multiplies to 24 and adds to 11. What multiplies to 24, the two numbers that I get from there are going to give us, we're going to get 24 by multiplying the 2 last. If you think about your foiling, the 24 comes from foiling the last, and the 11 comes from adding the O and the I together. So if I think about what numbers multiply to 24 and add to 11, those two numbers are actually 8 and 3. But here's the catch. I cannot just put, like I did before, 8 in one and 3 in the other. The 8 and the 3 have to come from the O and the I. I already have a 2x. So that 2x, because my numbers are 8 and 3, I know that 2x is part of how I'm getting an 8. I know it can't be the 3 because there's nothing without a fraction that will multiply from 2 to get to 3. So I know that the 2x that I have is going to be a part of how I am getting 8. So you have to think to yourself, 2 times what number is going to give me 8, and that's going to be 4. So when I'm doing FOIL and I'm going through this in multiplying direction, I have the outer is going to be 2x times 4. It's going to get me an 8x. And that means that the inside then has to be the 3x. And the 8 that I get from this outside and the 3x that I'm going to get from the inside does indeed add to 11x. And then let's just check to make sure what is 3 times 4, and I am going to get my 12 that I have. Okay, one more example. This one is going to be a little bit more challenging because the leading coefficient that I have is the number 4, and it's not like the last one where my only two factors were 2 and 1. I can get 4 by multiplying by 4 and 1 or 2 and 2. So I can't automatically just go and say it's going to be 4 and 1 or 2 and 2, but I do know that it's going to be x times x. So I have to think to myself, okay, I'm looking to see what multiplies to negative 12 and adds to negative 4. So this is the multiply, this is the add, and it's actually going to be the numbers negative 6 and negative 2. Knowing that actually helps you figure out which one of these two factors pairs you're going to use, because if I chose 4 and 1, there's no way I can get 4 and 1 to be 6 and 2. So that kind of does lead me. It is a guess and check, but it can also give you clues along the way. So if I need to get 6 and 2, I'm going to have to do that through a 2x and a 2x. I already have the 2x. It has to actually be a negative, so that just means we're going to have a negative 1. And the only way that I can get to the only way I'm actually realize I have a mistake here. The two numbers are going to be negative 6 and positive 2. So that means that this is a positive 1. So that's going to get me my positive 2 that I need. And in order to get to negative 6, I'm going to have 2x and negative 3. So that gets me negative 6 on the inside, positive 2 on the outside. That'll add together to get me negative 4x. And negative 3 times positive 1 gets me the negative 3. So that I know I've done that right now.